We're closing with a very sad task, but I think a very meaningful one, because the conclusion, I think, will be hopefully for all of us an optimistic one. Our former WSOA Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Dr. Ed Farrar, has passed away recently. I'm heavily conflicted in this because my mentor and former practice partner, Dr. Ted Wagner, he was the first chief of spine service here at Swedish, and then a professor at the University of Washington, was also the fellowship mentor of Dr. Ed Farah, and accompanied him throughout his professional life. And he has some unique and I think important perspectives to share. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Ted, for coming here and providing this important and I'm sure heavy-hearted lecture.
Jens, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk tonight. This really is about a friend of Jens's, of your entire Washington community, really the Northwest community. So I had an incredible opportunity to know Ed very well since 1983, actually, when he moved to the state of Washington. And, it's interesting to go back and look at a CV. I really couldn't find a new CV. So really we're dealing with an old CV, but it tells you a little bit about him. He was born in 1951, Atlanta, Georgia. Grew up in Florida. There aren't any mountains out there, but there's a lot of water. And he was involved in a lot of funny activities as a kid, trying to make money and sell fish and do all sorts of things. But he was clearly a bright guy. And he went on as a Phi Beta Kappa to Atlanta, Georgia. He became part of a lifelong vision of what he wanted to do. But a lot of it got changed when he traveled to the Northwest. And when he came here, he got involved in internal medicine, and he was actually convinced that that's what he was going to do. And he was accepted into the second year of his residency when he wrote a letter stating that he really wanted to do orthopedics. He had a father who was an orthopedist. That led to application to Dr. Rick Mattson for a residency position. And it's really wonderful to read over those letters. But when he got to Wenatchee, he became famous really quickly. And I can only tell you how famous he was because I used to go over to his clinic. This is about 5 years after he started in Wenatchee. And a cop pulled me over for speeding because it's a downhill road down into Wenatchee. And the cop asked me where I was going and why I was going so fast. I said to him, I'm coming to help Ed Farah. He said, okay, just slow down. And I knew by then that he was taking care of all the policemen and all the firemen and everybody else in town. So this is a little bit of a 2013 residence graduation. Jens, then the professor at the university, had invited him to give the residence graduation talk. So I'm going to play just a little bit of it.
I've never told this whole story, and I hope you don't get bored with it, but I'll try to make it meaningful as we go through it. I have to tell you that I'm thankful to be here tonight, partly because I actually wasn't here for my own graduation. I had taken a job in Auckland, New Zealand, and so I missed my graduation, and so I'm really glad to be here and finally be able to attend one. I would like to tell you that I had some high-minded purpose for taking a post as a senior registrar in Auckland, but the truth was that, oh my God, there you go, it's already out. Which button do I push to make it go forward? Oh, I go right. The right click? Yeah. Okay. Well, the truth was I was dying to climb Mount Cook on the South Island. And once there, I did get to climb Mount Cook. Whoa. There we go. No, I'll do it. I did get to climb Mount Cook. but I was amazed at how much I learned about orthopedics. And as I started work in Auckland, I learned that I still had a hell of a lot to learn. And that's the way life goes. So this is a story about some of those lessons. 30 years ago, I returned to Washington, and I helped to start Wenatchee Orthopedics. As you all know, the Northwest is a fantastic place to raise a family. I raised 2 sons here, and I was able to spend a lot of time with them in the Cascade Mountains. Fortunately, I was also able to carve out time to continue to do volunteer work in Nepal and continue climbing the high mountains of that country. Looking back, those trips may have helped with things that are hard. There must be some good that comes from grinding away at a big mountain. And then in 1997, an old football injury finally caught up with my knee, and I did one of my switches from physician to patient. After that total knee replacement, I was able to go ahead and return to Nepal in that same year and climb this mountain, Ahmed Ablam. As you all know, there are a lot of questions swirling these days about the large number of total knees being done. And the focus is more on cost instead of quality of life. Well, I am proof of the quality part of that equation. Because after my knee replacement, I was able to return to Nepal and even take my family on this trip. This is Nepal, and I was actually able to sell that slide to J&J for $1,000.
You can see now how charming, what a wonderful guy he was, and how many things he did. And I climbed with him a good bit. We took some risks. But Ed only rode his bike back and forth from the clinic to the hospital. And in 2008, he was riding his bike when a very reckless driver crossed the midline, hit him head on, and he was rendered immediately a T4 paraplegic. He was kept alive by another fellow of mine, Hank Vovoda, who was riding a bike the opposite direction. And there was a lot of artificial breathing for him until he got to the hospital with broken ribs and associations. So the last 13 years has really been the course of Ed's life. But he really had an incredible imagination for how he might be still a friend of his community and do work hard. So he actually ended up going back and seeing patients on a regular basis. He rode a pump bicycle about 10 miles every day with his group. And in the winter, he used a bucket and he used cross-country skis and went with the same group. There was a major award given to him in Wenatchee, and he showed up with something that has not yet really become common, and that's an exoskeleton. And the exoskeleton fits to the legs, and all of the motion is coordinated. And he actually walked in to this night when he was being honored, and the crowd was silenced. They have been talking about it ever since. But that really is what Ed was all about. But January 12th, he woke up with a very sore right shoulder. That right shoulder showed an incredibly deteriorating shoulder that you would assume was an infection. He was aspirated 3 times with over 100 cc's each time, and nothing ever grew. His consultations, including those to Dr. Mattson and to Dr. Broberg, decided that this was really a Charcot shoulder, and that there was no treatment for it. Ed, at this point, couldn't write. He couldn't transfer. He couldn't drive a car, and he couldn't really even clean his bottom. So this became a lot of emails back and forth from Ed to myself. And he chose to investigate something that he wants to teach all of us. And it was all about death and dying and the requirements. Now, I was certainly aware of the movement when it actually came to Oregon first. But I had never, ever been part of the process. I had never written a letter for a patient myself. So I wanted you to know a little bit about it, because that's what Ed would want me to talk about, because he was really involved in the misery of this. So I wanted to take you to he was also a poet. And this is a poem that he wrote, it's handwritten, Anguish. Anguish and an antidote. Anguish is like the world in which we live and starve for an anodyne. Tears are not part of the time. We long for what it meant to feel just fine, where laughter used to play. I long for light, more than the wrong and right. In a world that has gone gray, the seeds of hope need light to live, helping darkness turn to day. Light is real and does not falter. It helps the truth to stay. When the light brings hope and the truth into the world, the shadows fade away. Now, he sent that to me, and I knew now that we were into a change of the tide, and that he was going to make up this decision. To learn a little bit about it, you can go online. You can get more direct information at the moment from the Oregon posting than the Washington one, but they're the same. You have to be an adult over 18 years old. You have to reside in the state in which it's going to happen. That's, in this case, is Washington. You have to be capable to be able to make and communicate a healthcare decision. And you need to be diagnosed with a terminal illness that will lead to death within 6 months. So Ed did not qualify by this definition. We could have kept him alive for 6 months. But he went to see his doctor, Dr. Rutherford, who is a wonderful internist in Wenatchee. And many letters were written back and forth. And I didn't bring them all, but Ed's request to him was, you have to understand my misery. And you also have to understand that there is no fix. There is no surgeon who can fix my Charcot back or my Charcot shoulder at this point. So this is a little bit more the ruling. You have to have two physicians. You have to have a physician, and then you have to have a consulting physician. And you might go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist if either one of those doctors feel that's necessary. And the patient must make an oral request to his or his physician separate by at least 15 days. The change in the law affected in 2020 allows patients whose life expectancy is less than 15 days to skip that waiting period. The patient must provide a written request to his or her physician signed in the presence of two witnesses. The prescribing physician and the consulting physician must confirm the diagnosis. Now, these rules really apply initially in 3 states. The one that started was in Oregon, then it went to Washington, and then to Vermont. And now there are 6 states that allow death with dignity. And in those other states, they have to go to court to get that permission. But you can have death with dignity. And in ending, I can only say that Tom Stonecipher, who's up in Everett, reminded me that a quote from William Faulkner's address for a Nobel Prize, if applied to Ed's life, not merely endured, he prevailed. And I want to say goodbye to a great friend and to a friend of everybody here in the Northwest who got to know him. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful eulogy, and nobody better than you to give a perspective on life and the true magnitude of this man. How tough was Ed? There are some who could claim that suicide is a sign of weakness, but Ed is the probably strongest man I've ever met, and that includes yourself. Just a little clinical vignette. At Harborview, he was a volunteer faculty surgeon also, as if he didn't have enough to do in Wenatchee. And he'd bring really tough cases over to us. I remember we had a very sad Hispanic lady with a very nasty TB of the spine with paralysis in 2 different levels, in the thoracic and lumbar spine. We did a surgery together. He wanted to do this with me. And we did not allow a fellow or resident to scrub in because we did not want the contamination of TB bugs to any young trainees. The 2 of us did an about 12-hour surgery together. Ed was the fittest guy I ever knew. He climbed mountains. He brought me into bicycling. He was unbelievably fit. At the end of the case, we had been together doing this case very successfully. He sat down and he actually made a sound of exhaustion that I'd never heard from him before, and we had operated many times. He went, "Ugh." I was like, "Ed, are you getting weak on me?" And then I looked down on his knee and I saw blood on his knee, on his scrubs. And his leg was very tightly filling his scrub suit. His scrub suit was tight. I was like, "Ed, you got blood on you. You got to change your scrubs." And it said, like, "That's not the patient's blood. That's my own blood." I was like, "What happened?" He said, "I had a knee replacement. The one that you showed the slide of, I had a knee replacement 2 weeks ago." Ed did a 12-hour surgery with me, standing the whole time, 2 weeks after knee replacement, and his compression sock had no longer held his leg. It bled through. This is how tough this guy is. The toughness that he decided to leave this world and so many loving patients and colleagues must have been beyond belief, and the difficulty of decision making. So I want to just recognize that this decision must have been incredibly hard for him and took incredible bravery given his circumstances and his dedication to the mantra of life is motion, motion is life. So I just want to share that vignette in case anybody thought like, well, he took the easy way out. Definitely not.
He was a man of courage, and I was there when he took the elixir, and he seemed at peace. He seemed to have faced this mountain the way he faced all the mountains before. And I think he really wants everyone to know that it's a great privilege to have a way out when you're really miserable, and that we should all be aware of certain patients, certain people, and not shy away from the discussion. That's what he wanted me to say, I think.
This is very meaningful of you. I want to have those who are remaining on the panel have an open microphone. Starting from the top, my partner, Bob Hart, is there. Bob, any thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you, Jens, and thank you, Ted. I loved this honoring of Ed Farrar. I met Ed only a couple of times, but he certainly always impressed me as just a vibrant, intelligent, active, engaged surgeon. And I'm reminded of Rex Marco and his injury. I think this remains an injury that we don't have, obviously, the capability to reverse or really mitigate much. And when it happens to one of us as spine surgeons who take care of patients with similar injuries, I mean, there's so much kind of poetic impact to seeing someone that we know that knows exactly what has happened from the moment it's happened. And obviously that was Ed's course, and he fought through it, and until he couldn't fight through it anymore. And I found it very moving. I find the whole story very moving, and I appreciate the opportunity to reflect on his life. And I think you guys just did a brilliant job in eulogizing him. So.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, Bob, thanks for the comments. And as an orthopedist, you realize the difference between being paraplegic and then triplegic. And at that point, life is almost impossible. And so it was for Ed.
Alan?
I would say it gives one pause to have a perspective on our little petty issues and how we all have complaints about our lives, but to see somebody with this kind of courage is really uplifting, and it gives a good perspective. So I'm honored to be able to listen and hear about the story. So thank you.
And I'll go down the list. Jessica, thank you for still being with us. Any thoughts from your end?
Just always really wonderful to hear a eulogy like this and hear about the impact that a surgeon makes at the end of their career, kind of as they start off in practice, kind of life goals, right? To be maybe a quarter is good, and to aspire to be someone like him. So well done.
And we'll finish. Thank you. Well said. And Darren, I know you probably did not know Ed, or I think you were actually in the audience when he got his lifetime award. I don't remember exactly, but Darren, any thoughts on the quagmire and the conflict of an orthopedic surgeon being so disabled?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what you said before, Jens, motion keeps us going, and it's just such a powerful story. And I think it just makes you appreciate what our patients go through and what we go through when you know what's happening to you. And wow, I mean, all I can say is thank you for sharing. I wasn't aware of all the story of his life, and thanks.
Thank you all for joining us. Final word goes to Ted.
Well, I feel that those parents that have to attend their child's funeral is somewhat like this. This is, I'm 10 years senior to Ed, and it was a hard thing to get this together, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm happy that he would think this was the right thing. So thank you for the podium.
And we'll distribute this online also so that many people can share, and you can share it with others, especially as some of us and some of our patients face difficult decisions. So the know-how of a way out with dignity is very important to also know as we have difficult decisions and discussions to have. Thank you so much, Ted. And thank you, Ed. We miss you a lot, and God bless you.